Okay, kids, it's time for another episode of the Fueled by Weird podcast, the only podcast that knows what really happens inside the mystery machine. I'm Chris Daly, and today I'd like to welcome Jon Dexter to the show. John, how's it going, man?
Good. How are you doing? Thanks for having me on your show. It's fun to meet with new podcasters or YouTubers that I've never been on before. So it's pretty cool to be broken in.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I appreciate having you on, man. It's a real pleasure.
Thanks.
Absolutely. All right, so how the things work around here is usually before we get started, I like to do a little bit of an icebreaker question. So
Yeah.
today's question is, would you rather be able to control time or fly?
Oh man, that's a really good one. I probably would rather control time because I've made a lot of mistakes in my life.
Yeah, I actually that would be mine too for any number of reasons. I mean, flying would be fun, but I think yeah, the ability to control time I think would definitely be the one I would choose out of the two.
Yeah, I think when you're young, it's always fly, and once you get older, it's control time. I think you're
Yep.
yeah.
I think that's right because I everyone thinks I'm younger than I am, but I'm getting up there and I definitely yeah, I would like to go back and maybe redo some stuff or see how things are going to pan out in the future, whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah. Cool, man.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So I saw you posted something the other day that I kind of want to talk about because Kevin Smith, someone I've interviewed on this show before, is a
Oh,
huge inspiration of mine. A
yeah, mine too.
super big Kevin Smith fan. So I saw that you just recently got Dimestore Detective into Jane and Silent Bob's Secret Stash. So
Yeah.
if possible, I'd like to hear a little bit about how that all came to be.
Yeah. So I was signed by Source Point Press, the publisher for my Alpha Dog series, and I it's in the works to have Dempster Detective signed by them as well. They just do graphic novels.
Gotcha.
So that kind of was probably my in. I had cold called a lot of comic book stores, bookstores to carry my graphic novel for Alpha Dogs, and of course, being a big Kevin Smith fan. I mean, if you do comic books, how can you not be a fan? Even if you don't aren't a fan of his movies, what he's been able to do. I mean, he's like all of us, man. We all would love to have an indie film that gets huge. And,
Yeah.
of course, a big so. If anybody says their dream is to be Kevin Smith that writes comics, they're lying. so, um, so what happened was I just basically cold called the Crew Askew comic book store. They're the Jade and Silent Bob's. No, I'm sorry. I wrote them an email, and they surprisingly, shockingly said, "Yes, send your stuff over. We'll take a look at it." Because I was basically trying to get Alpha Dogs trade into their stores now that it's published. It's in Barnes and
Yeah.
Noble, and then of course I wrote a little P.S. I would love to have Mr. Smith read my comics. I'd love to bring him over, and they said bring him over. Um, and I didn't have much expectations, of course, other than Kevin Smith reading my comics and signing me to a movie deal. Other than that, I had no expectations, you know, or at
Yeah.
least giving me a shout out. I mean,
Sure.
it's in life. If you don't try, it's a 1 in 100 shot. If you don't
100%.
try, then you got nobody to blame but yourself. So,
Yeah.
I had. They said to send him to Michael Zabek. I don't know
Yeah.
if you know familiar. Yeah,
Hmm?
he's big time, man. He's big, and so almost 2 months later, I had contacted him because I hadn't heard anything in a month. He contacted me in a month, so I waited 6 weeks. I didn't want to be annoying,
Yeah.
and he had actually only read Dime Detective, and he said that it was compelling, and he would carry all my books on his shelf. So he said, "There's not only." He said there's just a little bit of space for indie creators such as myself, little guys such as myself. But he said, I mean, he liked my stuff enough that he's made a spot for me. So it's pretty awesome. I'm gonna wait till I get issue 5 published. That's if my Kickstarter funds, which is why I'm on the show, is hopefully to get that funded. We're doing good though.
Yeah.
So the fact that Michael, who is renowned comic book expert, is willing to carve out a little piece of little shelf for me, especially considering I'm not from Jersey, I'm not local. They had no obligation to give let my comics be on the shelf, but the fact that he liked them, I think, is a testament that these are good comics. People have been enjoying them. If but it's just me advertising, so I'm not getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of backers. I'm getting, I think 120 is my best. So it's
Yeah.
still a work in progress. But the fact that the small amount of people that have read my work, liked it, I was able to get signed by a publisher, and now in a couple months here, once the fifth issue of Dimestore Detective is printed and in my hands, that I'm going to be sending those to Jane Silent Box comic book store, which is, I mean, amazing. Is just awesome. I'm really excited about it.
That's cool, man. Yeah, being a big Kevin Smith fan, I watched a bunch of the show Comic Book Men that featured all those guys at the
Yes.
store, and just
Yeah.
watching Mike, he has such a an appreciation for comics, such a huge knowledge about comics. It's really cool. So, man,
Oh,
that's
and not to interrupt you, but
oh, you're
then
good.
this happened too, which was really cool.
Yeah.
So when I had sent him the comics, literally, uh, no, I'm sorry. It was a day before I sent him the comics because I was at Fantasticon in Toledo, Ohio for the comic book store
Hmm.
show. And lo and behold, Jason Mewes is there at the
Oh
at the
wow,
convention.
that's
So I
awesome.
like made a beeline to him. Oh, no, he was out having a smoke, and I had walked out. And I'm like, man, if I don't take my shot, I'm gonna regret it. So I
Nice.
said, hey, my comics are actually, I'm sending my comics to your store. Would you like them? And so so he's got all my comics. He's probably never gonna read them. They're probably sitting somewhere. But I just thought, man, it's kind of kismet. It's shoot, serpentility. I'm saying it wrong. Kismet.
Serendipitous.
Thank you.
Gotcha.
That I had just heard back from Michael, and he was there, so I gave him my comics. I haven't heard anything. It's been a few months, but I'm sure I probably won't. He's like I said, I'm sure everybody's giving him comics, but it's still pretty cool
Yeah, man, that's
that he
super
knows
cool.
my comics. I should have
Very
taken a
cool.
picture with him holding it. I totally screwed up, but I didn't want to be one of those guys.
Yeah.
So
No, I get
I
it. Yeah,
always,
that's
yeah.
cool, man. Congrats. That's a really big get. Very cool.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. So if anybody's in there in a couple months, they're gonna let me have five of each issue on their shelf. So if anybody's in there in the next couple of months, then you'll see my comics. So it's pretty cool. Or you can go to Kickstarter and get them now, so I can get this puppy funded.
Yeah, there you go. Very cool. All right, man. So, when you're not making comics, when you're not writing, what are some of the things you like to do in your spare time?
Well, is there spare time when you make comics? I don't know. It's
Fair point.
basically
Fair point.
work. When I get done with work, I come home and trying to advertise. It's creating comics is all fun, but honestly, 70% more than that is just trying to get the word out about your product because it's just you. You're in a sea of so many indie creators out there. Kickstarter people. I mean, Kickstarter is just. I mean, I'm going to assume they're like the third highest publisher, now of
Oh yeah,
comics because
for sure.
everybody puts their stuff on there, and so there's just a lot of competition and trying to stand out, trying to fight the algorithm is tough. I found that advertise on Facebook, it does no good. Paying for ads, don't do it. You're just wasting your money. So
Yeah.
but it's a learning process, and going on shows like yours helps a lot. Even if you get one backer, that's awesome. It's a grind. I mean, it honestly is a grind. You got to have a passion for it, and never give up. I guess because last year I was like, man, I'm never gonna do anything with it. It was tough, and then thankfully I was signed by a publisher, and now I never would have thought well, I guess I would have thought, but it's just super cool that my comics are going to be in Jay and Silent Bob's comic book store.
Yeah, that's super rad, man. That's really cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
it's hard, doing that grind because, like you said, going on all these different shows, you may not generate a lot of extra backers, but you're gonna get your stuff in front of people that may have never ever seen it before, which is cool.
exactly,
And so it might, you know, Dime Store Detective may not be the thing that hits with a certain new audience, but maybe, like you said, your other book, Alpha Dogs, or one of your other books, maybe they'll like, okay, this guy puts out some good stuff. And so, you want it to hit with everything. As a creator, I'm sure you already know that, not everything you make is going to be for everybody, but,
Mhm.
you're getting in front of a whole new batch of eyes. So that's definitely every little bit will help you for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and my genres are so different. The Alpha Dogs is kind of like X-Men meets Homeward Bound. It's these
That's
dogs that have
awesome.
these powers. It's actually inspired by my dog.
Nice.
So yeah, we had this dog that was pit bull mix. We had lived in this town for a little while. That was going to outlaw pit bulls, and we were going to get rid of our dog. So we moved, and that inspired me to create the story about this dog that's feared by the public because of his breeding size, but he has a big heart. It's kind of like that Casper the Friendly Ghost, where
Yeah.
people fear appearances, but inside there's a big heart. So of course, in my story, my dog has the power to heal from any wound. He's smart enough to understand human speech, and he has a heightened strength. Him and his owner are on the run from mercenaries that are trying to kidnap him to manipulate his powers. And these other dogs come in this series as it goes along. If you go to Amazon, Simon and Schuster, Barnes and Noble, you can read a blurb about it. Or you can go to back to my past Kickstarters, but that's also available on this Kickstarter. And then I have my Dimestore Detective that's currently out that we're talking about. It's a supernatural crime mystery. It's very unique. It's about this detective that is on a hunt for a serial killer, and in the process, we flash back to his life as when he was 8 years old, raised by moonshiners, embroiled in this turf war with this gang who tries to push this family, 4 generations of moonshiners, this family out of business by violence. But they're not going to go. They're from the South. They're from Georgia. They're, salt of the earth people. They're not going to go quietly, and they have this kind of gang war, I guess you could call it. And then at the center of the story is this evil entity that the detective's uncle and father inadvertently release out of a cave in the Appalachian Mountains that's been trapped there for hundreds of years by the Cherokee. And it ends up possessing the detective's uncle. And somehow in the present, it has perhaps returned. So the detective has to try to make the connection between the serial killer he's after and this return of this evil entity. And in the story, so people don't get confused, here's a page. This is one of the covers. I have awesome cover artist. Fernando did this one. So whenever it's in black and white, as you see, that's when we flash back to 1982 when the detectives had broiled in this moonshiner war, the detective's uncle. And then whenever it's in color, it's when we're back in the present, when the detective's after a serial killer. So you don't get confused. It's cool. Kind of nostalgia throwback to the old, dime store magazines, with the title and kind of what I'm going after with the story. So it's a lot of fun. If you like Stephen King's if you like True Detective, if you like LA Confidential, if you like Supernatural, then you definitely enjoy the series.
Very cool. That sounds super awesome. Now,
Yeah.
before we dig a little bit more into Dime Store Detective, I kind of want to jump in the Wayback Machine here for a minute, and I want to get into what it was originally that inspired you to become a writer in the first place.
Nothing really. It just was ingrained in me since I was a kid. Ever since I can remember, I thought everybody pretended their room was a movie studio, and I had my room was a movie studio, and I would introduce shows with my stuffed animals, and I would play them out, a movie or a TV series. I don't know where it came from. It's just what I've always been. So ever since I can remember, I've been a writer, creating stories. It's just what I do. I don't have a good explanation of why,
No,
to be
that's
quite
okay.
honest.
It's part of who you are. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
But yeah, I never had a big love for movies until I was a teenager. Then I became obsessed with them.
Nice. So, on that note, so what was it that got you interested in, comics and writing comics?
Well, I think anybody that was a teen or a preteen in the 90s that watched the X-Men, the Fox Kids X-Men show,
Yep.
probably became a fan, such as
Yeah,
myself.
me too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think I think the X-Men of the 90s TV show is the last generation Star Wars. When I was a little kid, I watched Star Wars, and that was it.
Yeah.
And that was Star Wars. The X-Men are my biggest inspirations to be a writer. But yeah, the X-Men, it was just so different because it was very kind of adult situations, real humanistic stories with these superheroes. You never seen that before
Yeah.
in cartoons. It was all hokey, goofy, Spider-Man and friends, and in the X-Men, I mean, I would use my paper route money to go buy back issues. Anything with Wolverine and Sabretooth,
Yeah.
that was my bag. I just loved it. And now that I got in my 40s, I'm more of indie guy. I don't really read superhero stories anymore. I'm more into like Ed Brubaker in indie comics, Brian K. Vaughan. That's kind of what
Yeah.
I read now. Well, we all go in phases. It's
Sure.
to me, there's I don't know. I just don't know if I could write a superhero story. I mean, Alpha Dogs is kind of like X-Men meets dogs, but it's a whole different type of story. But yeah, it'd be tough to get into the superhero genre because it seems like everything's been done. So,
Yeah, for sure.
but there's always something new.
On a little bit of a side note, as both of us being fans of the X-Men 90 series, what did you think of X-Men 97? Or have you had a chance to
I
watch
thought it
it
was
yet?
good. I
Yeah.
really went in. I really went in thinking this is gonna suck. You can't bottle, you can't capture lightning in a bottle twice. You just can't. But
Yeah.
honestly, I it for me it doesn't have the rewatchability of the old show, but it's still good. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd say they had three stories that really, catapulted into classic. It stands with the old cartoon, and which is awesome. It's great. It's weird hearing Rogue's old lady voice now, but and I have
Yeah.
the original Gambit, so I'm not gonna say it's quite as good, but some episodes, man, they go up there as canon. I mean, I don't want to. If anybody hasn't watched it, I don't want to give anything away. But those last two episodes, I mean, blow you away.
For sure. For sure. Okay, so let's roll into Dime Store Detective. So we've already kind of talked a little bit about what it's
Yeah,
about. I want to know now, what, if any, what was your inspiration of creating Dime Store Detective? Did you pull from like specific genres? Is this something that you've been baking in the dome for a little while? How did that pan out?
yeah. So it really started out back 5 years ago. I had, well, I'm even farther. Whenever America was searching for Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan, in the
Yeah.
caves of
Yeah, yeah.
Afghanistan. Now this is going back now. So I remember reading an article where they said some caves in Afghanistan are so dense that they're unexplored. So I created the story of these Marines looking for Osama bin Laden, going to this cave. Um, get trapped in there and find this being, this evil entity. We don't know if it's a demon, ghost, we don't know what it is. And it ends up possessing one of the soldiers. And now in the present, 5 years later, our main character soldier is a detective and out towards California, and the man that was possessed, the ex-marine, his mother is the mayor of LA, and he kind of gets away with murder, a lot of corruption. But I just wasn't satisfied with the story. There was something lacking. And, if you're going to spend so much time writing a story and creating a comic book that's going to take a lot of money, a lot of time, it's got to be, for me, it's got to be perfect. It's got to be something that's going to be, to me, groundbreaking. So it just sat there for 5 years. And then I had listened to a podcast about the Dixie Mafia. And these guys were like, the New York Mafia, but of the South. You're talking Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia, Alabama. This was a real gang called the Dixie Mafia that was really prevalent in the 60s, 70s, and 80s and petered out in the 90s. But these guys were hitmen, they were drug runners. I mean, everything bad, if you think of the New York Mafia, was the
Yeah.
South, this Dixie Mafia. And I just was fascinated. I thought, I can't believe nobody's told this story about these guys. I just couldn't believe it. And so I had decided that I was going to write the story about this kid whose father, was a moonshiner, and his family goes to war with the Dixie Mafia. And honestly, it all kind of came together, merging those two different stories in an afternoon of driving. It all kind of came together. So I was really happy with it. It developed for many years before it became a comic book.
Very cool. Now, when you sit down for the creation process, when you're writing up the stories, like to kind of let's walk through your process a little bit.
Um, Usually it just percolates and I take down notes for months until I think I have a story. Until I have enough scenes, I think, to create a story. So it usually percolates for a few months, and then until I can't barely stand it anymore, it's just going to blow out of my head. Then
Yeah.
I am on a fury of writing. And so Dumpster Detective actually, I would write an issue in one day, and the next day I would edit, and the next day I would write the next issue, next day edit. And so it was all written out in about 3 weeks, Dumpster Detective, the 9 issues. Now, granted, over the years, it's, you know, done some percolating, doing some changes and develop, but for the most part, the bulk of the story, 80% of it was written in a span of 3 weeks.
Nice. So you had said, you wrote the 9 issues of it. Do you have plans to go beyond nine? Are you wrapping up at nine? Ideally, where does the story take you?
So the story ends completely after 9 issues. It's done. I
Okay.
would love to write another Dumpster Detective, totally different. I have another story, a few other ones, but they're not fully developed. But yeah, I'd like to do, another volume two, but with a different main character, different scenario. I had one that I developed many, many years ago that has just been kind of sitting in the back of my brain for many years that I might explore. But right now, I'm trying to get through Dumpster Detective and Alpha Dogs because I'm only issue 5 for each of them. And like I said, Alpha Dogs is 10 issues and Dimestore is 9. So I still got a long ways to go. My hope is that it really gets big and I can actually write these issues out and release them much sooner than what I am. But, it takes building a fan base, which is, part of the grind.
For sure, for sure. Okay, so with you, like we mentioned, Dime Store Detective issue 5 or issue 1 through 5 is on Kickstarter right now. It's going to end on June 5th. So we'll make sure we put the link to the Kickstarter out there. We'll share it on all the socials to get the word out to everybody, just so everybody's aware. Um, let's talk a little bit about the Kickstarter, just the process of the Kickstarter, what's available, kind of maybe some different add-ons that have been locked already.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even I would encourage anyone just at the very least check out the Kickstarter. The trailer is amazing. I'm really proud
Yes,
of the trailer. It's might be the
so
best one
good.
we've done. It's a great trailer. If that doesn't get you pumped to want to back the comic, I really don't know what else to do.
Yeah,
There's great covers. Fernando Malik. So my team is Stone Tower Studios for the most part. Fernando Malik, he does a lot of the covers. Alfredo Redmar, he does all the inking and drawing for the interiors. The covers are incredible. I'm really, really blown away. Jeffrey Hayes does the old pulp covers for me as the variant. Very renowned guy. He just won like 3 awards recently for his covers. He's
nice.
that good.
That's cool.
Um, that's one with the guys with the knife on there. But yeah, the covers are fantastic. The trailer is, thrilling. But yeah, there's one where you for only $25 you can get all 5 issues digitally. You can get all the comics, just regular ones. I think between 14 and $16. But if you move up just a couple more bucks, things like $3 more, you can get a Kickstarter exclusive sticker. Your name is going to be on the thank you page at the back of the book, and I sign it. So for a few bucks more, you get a lot of cool stuff. And then there's a tier where you can get an original art page. Issue 1 was hand drawn, half of issue 2 was hand drawn, and the rest was all digitally done. And so I only have a few of these pages, but to get enough money to pay for it, I'm selling 5 of the original art pieces from issue 2. One sold already. I don't know if I'm going to offer them after this one because of course, it's the only original art I own for my comics, so I want to keep a lot of it. But
Sure.
you got to pay the bills. So
Yeah.
that's a really cool one. And who knows, now that it's going to be signed by a publisher and gets stores, if the comic does blow up, if maybe Kevin Smith checks out the comic, it would really blow up.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
they might become worth something. I don't know, but they're cool either way.
Very cool. So yeah, like we said, the Kickstarter's going through June 5th. So make sure you check it out while you can. There's some really good looking stuff in there. If you like John said, if you haven't seen the trailer, check out the trailer. It's super good. There's lots of great covers in there, and you've got some catch-up tiers, you said, with your other stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So if you're interested in Alpha Dogs, You can get that. I have another issue, series called Space Cruising. It's a sci-fi adventure comedy. It's totally different, a lot of fun. If you like Spaceballs, if you like Star Wars, you'll definitely want to check it out. I want to do more of those, but first I got to get through these two series first before I can do issue 2 of Space Cruising. So this is a great introduction. It's basically an introduction into the world of Space Cruising, where it's these three kind of outcasts, this human Bushido warrior, enhanced human, an alien who loves Earth pop culture. He wears a cowboy hat, I Shot JR t-shirt, which most people probably don't know what I'm talking about. There was a TV show called Dallas in the 80s, and a famous
Yeah.
a guy that was shot. And he wears a World War II bomber jacket. He's a very funny part of the comic relief. And then there's this obsolete android named Phobos. And these three, they're not trying to explore new galaxies, fight the Empire. They're just trying to make a buck, finding human artifacts that are scattered around the galaxy. And they end up getting embroiled in this major weapon that these aliens are trying to get their hands. I'm sorry, humans are trying to get their hands on, and aliens that could turn the tide of a war. So it's a fun stories that I think have been really enjoying.
That's cool. And I really like when creators they offer that different catch-up tier for the other books. So they're offering not only the book that's, the feature book on the Kickstarter, but other books so you can catch up on other bits of their library. That's really cool you do that.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, I mean, Alpha Dogs was signed by a publisher as well. Only about 2% of writers get publishers. So the fact that Dimestore Detective will be published and Alpha Dogs is published is it says that this guy does have good comic books. There's
Yeah,
a lot. I don't want to say a lot, but there's some Kickstarters that people back. I've backed that it's like, oh my gosh, this is not very good. But so the fact that it does have a publisher, I think people will really enjoy these stories that are very diverse, but that have really kind of been picking up steam.
absolutely. Now, after this Kickstarter is over, what do you have coming up after this that you can talk about?
So I'll be doing, thankfully, the graphic novel of Alpha Dogs is almost out of print. So I'll be doing another print run of Alpha Dogs, but this time it's going to be issues 1 through 5 instead of 1 through 4. And there'll be a new cover that looks really great. I'm going to release it once I get closer to kicking off that Kickstarter, but that's going to be late summer, I think, before I do that, because that's I just had Alpha Dogs 5 and now I'm doing this one, so I need a little bit of a breather. And summer is
Sure.
really difficult for Kickstarters because everybody's out and about. So I learned a long time ago, don't put your Kickstarter in the middle of summer. It's tough.
Yeah,
It's really, unless you're a big name, which I'm not. It's pretty tough in the summertime for Kickstarters.
sure. Cool. So we've got Alpha Dogs is the next big one that's coming up next.
Yeah, yep. And like I said, they can get issues 1 through 5 in this Kickstarter as well. Space Cruise in issue 1. I've really tried to make it as low as possible, the price to, incentivize people to back it, to check it out. And yeah, so it's really, a lot of people's Kickstarters, they're charging $20 for the comic. I'm only charging 14 to 16 for the rare variants. There is not going to be a whole lot of these made because next year I'll be doing the graphic novel. So
Yeah,
um, everything that you have get in this Kickstarter is all first run of all these comics. And, I didn't know I was going to do the next one. So I think, some of them, I think I only have like 300 copies even printed up of the comics.
very cool. All right. So before I let you go, I want to give you a chance. Usually I ask all my guests to share some advice just with the other fellow podcast listeners. So what's some advice you'd like to share with the listeners out there?
For life or for
For
creating comic
create
books?
for
Yeah.
creativity, for comic books, whatever.
Boy, I guess I would say to develop yourself, read whatever you're into. Don't read just one genre, read a plethora, read books, read graphic novels. I've always found real life stories to be more inspirational than any kind of fiction anyway.
Sure.
But so I try to listen to and read a little bit of everything. And read bad comics, figure out why if you read a comic, you're like, this sucks, figure out why it sucks. What do you feel the writer did wrong to make it not good? And then learn from that. It's just, honestly, I think it's just as important, well, not just pretty close as important to read the bad stuff and the good stuff, and to develop yourself to understand why this didn't work. I've opened up comics before where, you know, you open up the comic, it's like a page of writing exposition. Stay away from exposition. Try to let, in my experience, I try to let the panels move the story and not get bogged down with a lot, unless you're, Alan Moore, and I don't think very many of us are, where you're
Right.
writing amazing prose. I don't have a lot much narration in my comics. I try to let the panels, you're not reading War and Peace here, you're reading a comic book, so try to let the panels do the work for you. That's advice I would give. And like I said, just read as much as you can. I listen to Tyler's podcast about making comic books. That's great advice. Get yourself an email list. And to get that, you got to go to comic book conventions and grind that out. Because I mean, a week, some of them are 3 days, and it is a grind. But if it's something you love, you're passionate about, put a newsletter out there and have a sign up. I wish I had done that when I first started, but it's every Kickstarter and everything you do should be a learning process. So hopefully that advice helps. And on my actually Facebook today, I just reposted. Krista Grant had some really great advice. She had like 7 pointers of what to do to get your work out there, and I would encourage anybody to look at that, because it helps me too. So
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I like what you said about, not, letting the panels speak for your work and not fill up every single panel with a bunch of dialogue. I read a comic once that I think there was so much dialogue, like there was hardly even any art in each of the panels. Like they just filled it with all these dialogue bubbles. I was like,
yeah.
this is ridiculous, man. Like if you have to explain this much, you're not telling your story very well.
No, no. The key to storytelling is to get in as late as possible and to get out as early as possible. So, in other
Yeah.
words, when you start a comic, there shouldn't be, hey, how you doing? It should be, oh my God, there's a dead body in front of me.
Right.
That's what you should do, um, to create something that's enticing, because, um, we are people with a very short attention spans as it is, thanks to
Sure.
our phones and the
Yeah,
internet. So,
absolutely.
um, people just don't read like they used to, unfortunately. I'm just as guilty. I play on my phone more than I do read. So
Yep,
we're all guilty of it.
for sure.
So that's advice I would give, is to get in as late and don't bog people down with, oh my gosh, I just read a comic book recently. It was like, I couldn't even finish. I don't finish most of the comic books I read it, but I back on Kickstarter because there's a lot of them that it's like, oh my goodness. So, but anyway.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so where can we keep up to date with stuff coming from you? Where can we find you on the internet?
Yeah, so as again, I'm on Kickstarter, Jon Dexter, or you type in Dimestore Detective, you can find me there. My comic books, and you can see the old trailers. All the trailers that I've done are really great. I'm on Facebook under Jon Dexter. I have a group called Jon Dexter Comics on Facebook. I'm on X at Real Alpha Dogs. I'm on Instagram at Alpha_Dogs_comic. So unfortunately, all my handles are all Alpha Dogs, because that's the first comic I started out, and I built a fan base, and thankfully I was able to get into another series with my Dimestore Detective, because I didn't know I don't know if I'd be able to go on issue one of Alpha Dogs. You just
Yeah,
don't know. So
sure.
yeah, thankfully I've been a little lucky. Still working on getting the success that a lot of great people have had on Kickstarter. I mean, there's some people that have make a living off Kickstarter comics. That's really awesome.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so again, another reminder, Dime Store Detective, number 1 through 5 is on Kickstarter right now. It ends June 5th. And again, we'll put the link in the show notes. We'll put the links all over social media so everyone can find it. And you can like, comment, share, check it out with all your friends. Um, in closing for me, I'd like to thank Polygon Horizon. The song Pizza Force is the song we use for the show. It's a great song. They're a great band. Go check them out on Bandcamp. You can find Fueled by Weird on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. You can also find us on YouTube, Spotify, and anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also email me at fueledbyweird@gmail.com. Now, Fueled by Weird, the Nerdy Manroom show with Hassel and Monster, Hassel's Review, and Big Rob's House of Entertainment and No Chinese Food make up the Stay Weird Network. It's a brand new podcast network dedicated to bringing some awesome back to the internet. Check us out at Stay Weird Network on YouTube and Instagram, and send us an email at stayweirdnetwork@gmail.com. And finally, I'd like to thank the Zone Collectibles in Tifton, Georgia. They're the sponsors for the show, and they're your one-stop shop for comics, collectibles, and so much more. Now, if you like the show, please leave a review and tell your friends because word of mouth is my friend. And remember, kids, life's too short to be normal, so stay weird. John, thanks so much for joining me tonight, man.
And thanks for having me on. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely.